What if the thing you're most worried about right now is actually the very thing that's quietly aligning your life in the right direction? We often move through life believing that events are scattered, disconnected, and governed by chance. When something unexpected happens, especially something painful or inconvenient, the immediate reaction is to label it as bad luck or misfortune. This belief creates a quiet sense of helplessness, as if we are passengers in a vehicle we do not control, moving through roads chosen by something outside of us. But if you begin to observe more carefully, you may notice a subtle pattern. Life does not simply happen to you, it interacts with you. It responds, reflects, and sometimes even amplifies what is already happening within your inner world. Consider how your perceptions shape your reality. Two people can experience the same situation, yet walk away with completely different interpretations and outcomes. One sees rejection, the other sees redirection. One feels defeated, the other feels challenged. The external event is the same, but the internal response creates a different experience. This is where the idea of life being responsive becomes clear. It is not only the event itself that defines your path, but the meaning you assign to it and the energy you carry into it. Over time, these interpretations begin to influence your actions, your decisions, and ultimately the results you encounter. There is also a deeper layer to this responsiveness that goes beyond conscious thought. Many of your beliefs operate quietly beneath awareness, shaping how you behave without you even realizing it. If you carry a belief that you are not worthy of success, you may unconsciously avoid opportunities, hesitate at critical moments, or settle for less than what you desire. Life then appears to confirm that belief, not because it is inherently true, but because your actions have aligned with it. In this way, life mirrors your inner state with remarkable precision, reflecting both your limitations and your potential. This reflection is not meant to punish or reward, but to reveal. It acts as a feedback system, constantly offering you information about yourself. When something repeatedly shows up in your life, whether it is a type of relationship, a recurring obstacle, or a familiar disappointment, it is often pointing toward an unresolved pattern within you. Instead of asking why this keeps happening, a more useful question might be what part of you continues to attract or recreate this experience. This shift in perspective moves you from a position of victimhood to one of awareness, where you begin to see your role in the unfolding of your own life. At the same time, responsiveness does not mean control in a rigid or mechanical sense. It does not suggest that you can dictate every outcome simply by thinking differently. Life remains complex, influenced by countless variables beyond individual perception. However, within that complexity, your inner state still plays a powerful role. It shapes how you engage with the world, how you respond to uncertainty, and how you navigate change. The more aligned you are internally, the more coherent your actions become, and the more likely it is that your external reality begins to reflect that alignment. There is also a quiet intelligence in how life responds over time. Sometimes the response is immediate and obvious, while other times it unfolds slowly, requiring patience and reflection to understand. What feels confusing in the present may reveal its meaning much later, when you can see how one experience led to another, forming a chain of events that could not have been predicted in advance. This delayed clarity can be frustrating, but it also highlights the depth of the process. Not everything is meant to be understood in the moment it occurs. When you begin to see life as responsive rather than random, your relationship with uncertainty changes. You become more attentive, more curious, and less reactive. Instead of resisting what happens, you start observing it, looking for the message or the pattern it might be revealing. This does not remove difficulty, but it transforms how you experience it. Challenges become opportunities for insight, and even discomfort gains a sense of purpose. Over time, This perspective builds a deeper sense of trust, not in the predictability of outcomes, but in the meaningfulness of the process itself. There are moments when life seems to close in on you without warning, when something you were certain about suddenly disappears or collapses. A plan you carefully built begins to unravel. A relationship you trusted comes to an end, or an opportunity you believed was meant for you slips away at the last moment. In those moments, it is natural to interpret what happened as failure, as loss, or even as a sign that something has gone wrong in your life. The mind immediately tries to make sense of the disruption, often choosing the harshest explanation, convincing you that you were not good enough, not prepared enough, or simply not meant to succeed. This interpretation can feel convincing because it is immediate and emotionally charged, but it is also incomplete. What you often perceive as a setback is limited by your current perspective, which is shaped by what you can see and understand right now. You are looking at a single moment in isolation, without access to the broader sequence of events that is still unfolding. Because of this, you judge the situation based on short-term discomfort rather than long-term direction. The pain of losing something can overshadow the possibility that what you lost was not aligned with where you truly need to go. This is where the idea of redirection begins to take form, not as a comforting illusion, but as a deeper recognition that life sometimes removes certain paths because they are not sustainable for your growth. Redirection often feels uncomfortable because it disrupts your sense of control and certainty. When you are moving towards something you desire, you create an image of the future that feels stable and predictable. You begin to invest your identity into that image, shaping your expectations around it. When that image breaks, it does not just affect your plans, it affects your sense of self. This is why setbacks can feel so personal, even when they are not a reflection of your worth. They challenge the narrative you have built about who you are and where you are going, forcing you to confront the possibility that your direction needs to change. There is also a subtle resistance to redirection because it requires letting go of attachment. You may hold on to a specific outcome, believing it is the only way forward, even when signs suggest otherwise. This attachment can create tension, causing you to push harder against situations that are no longer working. The more you resist, the more difficult the experience becomes, reinforcing the feeling that something is wrong. Yet, when you step back and allow space for a different path to emerge, you may begin to notice alternatives that were previously invisible. These alternatives do not always appear immediately, and their absence can create a sense of uncertainty. But that uncertainty is often a necessary part of the transition. Over time, many people recognize that some of the most meaningful changes in their lives began as disruptions. A missed opportunity led them to a different field. A broken relationship opened the door to a deeper connection. A failure pushed them to develop skills they would not have pursued otherwise. These outcomes are rarely predictable in the moment they occur, which is why they are so difficult to trust while you are experiencing them. It is only with distance and reflection that the pattern becomes visible, revealing how one closed door made another possible. This does not mean that every setback will immediately reveal its purpose, or that every difficult experience will lead to something clearly better. The process is often uneven, filled with periods of doubt and ambiguity. However, within that uncertainty, there is still movement, a quiet shift in direction that continues even when you cannot fully perceive it. The challenge is not to force meaning too quickly, but to remain open to the possibility that the path you are being guided toward may be different from the one you originally imagined, and that this difference does not diminish its value or its potential to lead you somewhere significant. There is a quiet discomfort that arises when you find yourself in situations that do not make sense, when the answers you seek are not available and the clarity you expect does not arrive. In those moments, the mind becomes restless, searching for explanations, trying to organize the experience into something logical and predictable. You want to understand why things are happening the way they are, to connect cause and effect, to regain a sense of order. Yet, growth does not always follow the path of immediate understanding. In fact, some of the most profound changes occur precisely when clarity is absent, when you are forced to move forward without knowing exactly where you are going or why the current moment feels so uncertain. This lack of understanding can feel unsettling because it removes the sense of control that comes from certainty. When you understand something, you feel equipped to manage it, to respond appropriately, and to anticipate what comes next. Without that understanding, you may feel exposed, as if you are navigating without direction. However, this state of not knowing creates a unique condition where transformation becomes possible. It disrupts habitual thinking, challenges existing beliefs, and pushes you beyond the boundaries of what feels familiar. In this space, you are no longer relying on old patterns to guide your actions, which allows something new to emerge. Many of the patterns that shape your life are built on assumptions you have rarely questioned. These assumptions influence how you interpret situations, how you respond to challenges, and how you define your own limitations. When everything makes sense, these patterns remain intact because they are not being challenged. It is only when you encounter something that does not fit within your current framework that you are forced to reconsider what you believe to be true. This disruption can feel confusing, even disorienting, but it is also an invitation to expand your perspective. Instead of reinforcing what you already know, you begin to explore what you have not yet understood. There is also a deeper emotional layer to this process. When you do not understand what is happening, you may experience frustration, doubt, or even fear. These emotions are often seen as obstacles, something to be avoided or minimized, but they are part of the growth itself. They reveal your attachment to certainty and your discomfort with ambiguity. By staying present with these emotions rather than escaping them, you begin to develop a different kind of resilience, one that is not dependent on having all the answers. This resilience allows you to remain engaged with the process even when it feels unclear or incomplete. Growth in these moments is not always visible. It does not announce itself in obvious ways or produce immediate results. Instead, it unfolds gradually, often beneath the surface of your awareness. You may not notice the shift while it is happening, but over time, you begin to respond differently to situations that once felt overwhelming. Your perspective broadens, your reactions become less rigid, and your capacity to handle uncertainty increases. This change is subtle yet significant because it reflects an internal transformation rather than an external achievement. There is also a tendency to rush toward understanding, to seek quick explanations that provide temporary comfort. While this may ease the discomfort in the short term, it can limit the depth of the growth that is possible. When you settle for immediate answers, you may overlook the complexity of the experience and the insights that require time to develop. Allowing yourself to remain in a state of not knowing, even when it feels uncomfortable, creates space for a more meaningful understanding to emerge later. This kind of understanding is not imposed from the outside, but discovered from within, shaped by reflection, experience, and patience. Over time, you may begin to recognize that the moments you resisted the most, the ones that felt confusing and difficult to accept, were also the ones that changed you in the most significant ways. They altered how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you approach the unknown. What once felt like a lack of direction becomes a turning point, not because it provided clear answers at the time, but because it required you to grow beyond your previous way of thinking and being. There is a natural tendency to seek control over the events of your life, to organize circumstances in a way that feels predictable and safe. From an early stage, you learn to plan, to anticipate, and to manage outcomes as a way of reducing uncertainty. This desire for control often becomes deeply embedded, shaping how you approach decisions, relationships, and even your expectations of the future. You may believe that if you think carefully enough, act strategically enough, and prepare thoroughly enough, you can avoid unwanted outcomes and secure the results you desire. While this approach can create a temporary sense of stability, it also builds an invisible tension because reality does not always conform to your plans. Control, in this sense, is not entirely real. It is a constructed sense of certainty that depends on the assumption that all variables can be accounted for and managed. In practice, life is influenced by countless factors beyond your awareness or influence. Other people's choices, unexpected changes, timing, and circumstances that unfold without warning all play a role in shaping outcomes. No matter how carefully you plan, there will always be elements that remain outside your reach. When these elements disrupt your expectations, the illusion of control begins to break, often leading to frustration, anxiety, or a sense of failure. This does not mean that effort, intention, or responsibility lose their value. You still make decisions, take action, and influence your direction. However, there is a difference between participating in your life and attempting to dominate every aspect of it. When control becomes excessive, it shifts from being a useful tool to a limiting force. You may find yourself overanalyzing situations, hesitating to act unless you feel certain of the outcome, or trying to manipulate circumstances to fit a specific vision. This approach can reduce flexibility, making it harder to adapt when things do not go as planned. Trust, on the other hand, operates in a different way. It does not eliminate uncertainty or guarantee specific results, but it changes how you relate to the unknown. Trust is not based on having all the information or being able to predict what will happen next. It is a decision to remain open, to move forward without complete assurance, and to accept that not everything can be controlled. This choice requires a shift in perspective, from trying to secure certainty to developing confidence in your ability to respond to whatever arises. There is a subtle strength in this form of trust. It allows you to engage with life more freely, without the constant pressure to manage every detail. Instead of resisting change, you begin to work with it, recognizing that unpredictability is not necessarily a threat, but a natural part of the process. This does not mean that you become passive or indifferent. Rather, you become more present and responsive, able to adjust your actions based on what is actually happening, rather than what you expected to happen. The relationship between control and trust also reflects how you relate to yourself. When you rely heavily on control, you may be expressing a lack of confidence in your ability to handle unexpected situations. You attempt to prevent difficulty rather than face it. Trust, in contrast, involves acknowledging that challenges may arise, but believing that you have the capacity to navigate them. This belief is not based on certainty, but on experience, resilience, and the understanding that you have adapted before and can do so again. There are moments when letting go of control feels uncomfortable, even unsettling, because it removes a familiar sense of structure. You may feel exposed, as if you are stepping into uncertainty without protection. However, within that discomfort, there is also space. Space for new possibilities, for perspectives that were not considered, and for outcomes that could not have been planned in advance. This space allows life to unfold in ways that are not limited by rigid expectations, creating opportunities for growth that might otherwise remain hidden. Over time, the balance between control and trust becomes more apparent. You continue to take responsibility for your actions and decisions, but you release the need to dictate every result. You recognize that while you can influence your path, you cannot define it entirely. This recognition does not weaken your position, it creates a more grounded and adaptable way of moving through life, where effort and openness coexist, and where the unknown is approached with curiosity rather than resistance. There is a quiet pressure that builds when you begin to measure your life against an imagined timeline. You look around and see others reaching milestones that you thought you would have achieved by now, and a subtle sense of urgency begins to take hold. It may appear as a thought that you are falling behind, that you have missed opportunities, or that you are somehow late to your own life. This perception can become deeply convincing, especially in a world where progress is often displayed in visible and measurable ways. Achievements are highlighted, milestones are celebrated, and comparison becomes almost automatic. Within this environment, it is easy to forget that what you are seeing is only a fragment of a much larger and more complex reality. The idea that there is a universal timeline that everyone must follow is an assumption that rarely holds true when examined closely. Each individual moves through life with a different set of experiences, influences, and internal processes that shape their development. What appears to be a delay from the outside may actually be a necessary period of preparation, one that is not immediately visible or easily understood. Growth does not always present itself in obvious forms. It can occur quietly through reflection, through challenges that reshape your perspective, or through experiences that build resilience without producing immediate external results. When you believe that you are behind, you may begin to rush decisions in an attempt to catch up. This urgency can lead to choices that are not fully aligned with your deeper values or long-term direction. Instead of moving with intention, you react to a perceived gap between where you are and where you think you should be. This reaction can create a cycle where the pressure to accelerate leads to outcomes that feel unsatisfying or incomplete, reinforcing the belief that something is not progressing as it should. The more you focus on the idea of being late, the more difficult it becomes to recognize the significance of where you currently stand. There is also an emotional dimension to this perception. Feeling behind often carries a sense of inadequacy, as if your current position reflects a lack of ability or effort. This interpretation overlooks the complexity of your journey and reduces it to a comparison that may not be relevant or accurate. It assumes that progress is linear and consistent, when in reality, it often unfolds in phases, with periods of apparent stillness followed by moments of rapid change. These quieter phases are not empty or unproductive. They are often where the groundwork is being laid for what comes next. Precision in timing does not imply perfection or ease. It suggests that there is an alignment between your internal readiness and the opportunities that arise. When something enters your life at the right moment, you are able to engage with it in a way that you could not have before. You have the awareness, the experience, or the capacity to respond effectively. If the same opportunity had appeared earlier, it might not have been recognized or utilized in the same way. In this sense, what feels like a delay can actually be a form of synchronization, ensuring that when movement occurs, it has a greater impact. The difficulty lies in recognizing this precision while you are still within the process. Without a clear view of what lies ahead, it is challenging to trust that your current position has meaning. You may question your pace, your direction, or your decisions, especially when external comparisons are readily available. However, when you shift your focus from where others are to where you are, a different perspective begins to emerge. You start to notice the specific ways in which you have changed, the insights you have gained, and the strengths you have developed, even if they are not immediately visible to others. There is also a tendency to overlook how past experiences contribute to your present readiness. Moments that seemed unrelated or even unnecessary at the time may later reveal their relevance, providing skills, understanding, or resilience that becomes essential. These connections are not always apparent in real time, which is why the process can feel uncertain. Yet, when you look back, the sequence often appears more coherent, as if each stage played a role in shaping what followed. As you continue to move forward, the perception of timing may begin to shift. Instead of seeing your journey as delayed, you start to recognize it as unfolding in a way that is specific to you. The emphasis moves away from comparison and toward alignment, where the focus is not on how quickly something happens, but on how meaningfully it integrates into your life. This perspective allows you to engage more fully with the present without the constant pressure to accelerate or justify your pace, creating space for a deeper understanding of how your path is developing in its own way. There are periods in life when nothing seems to be moving, when the effort you are putting in does not produce visible results, and when the silence around your progress feels almost unsettling. In these moments, it is easy to assume that nothing is happening, that you are stuck in a place that lacks direction or purpose. The absence of clear signs can create a sense of doubt, leading you to question whether your actions are leading anywhere at all. This perception is often reinforced by the expectation that progress should be visible, measurable, and immediate. When those indicators are missing, the conclusion that nothing is aligning can feel justified, even though it may not reflect what is actually taking place beneath the surface. Alignment does not always announce itself through obvious changes or immediate outcomes. Much of what shapes your path develops gradually through processes that are not immediately visible. Conversations that will influence your direction may not have happened yet. Opportunities that will become significant may still be forming, and internal shifts that prepare you for what is ahead may still be unfolding. These elements exist in a state of potential, not yet realized, but already in motion. Because they are not fully formed, they remain outside of your direct awareness, creating the impression that nothing is progressing. There is also an internal aspect of alignment that is often overlooked. While external circumstances may appear unchanged, your perception, your understanding, and your capacity to respond are continuously evolving. These changes may be subtle, occurring through reflection, through experiences that reshape your thinking, or through moments of clarity that alter how you interpret your situation. Even when you are not consciously focusing on growth, your mind continues to process, integrate, and adapt. This internal movement plays a crucial role in how you will engage with future opportunities, influencing the choices you make and the paths you recognize as viable. The difficulty arises from the gap between what you expect progress to look like and how it actually unfolds. You may anticipate a direct and visible trajectory where each step leads clearly to the next. Instead, the process often involves pauses, detours, and periods where the direction is not immediately clear. These intervals can feel unproductive, as if they are delaying what you are trying to achieve. However, they can also serve as points of recalibration, allowing different elements of your life to come into balance before the next phase begins. Without these pauses, movement might occur too quickly, without the depth or stability needed to sustain it. There is a tendency to interpret stillness as stagnation, but stillness can also be a form of preparation. Just as physical systems require time to adjust and stabilize, personal growth often involves periods where external change slows down while internal processes continue. During these times, you may be consolidating what you have learned, reassessing your priorities, or developing a clearer sense of direction. These processes are not always visible, and they may not produce immediate results, but they contribute to a more coherent and grounded progression over time. Alignment also involves the interaction between your actions and external conditions. While you continue to make choices and take steps forward, there are broader circumstances that influence how those actions unfold. Timing, context, and the readiness of other factors all play a role in determining when certain opportunities become accessible. This interaction is not entirely within your control, which can make it difficult to trust. However, it also means that movement is not solely dependent on constant activity. There are moments when allowing space for conditions to develop can be as important as taking direct action. As you remain engaged with your path, even when it feels uncertain, you begin to notice subtle shifts that indicate movement. A new perspective emerges, a connection forms, or an idea takes shape in a way that was not possible before. These shifts may seem small in isolation, but they often contribute to larger changes that become apparent over time. The process rarely follows a straight line, and it may not align with your initial expectations, but it continues nonetheless, guided by a combination of internal development and external circumstances that gradually come together in ways that are not always immediately visible.